I think the audience knows you well enough to know that most of your engineering team for TechFlex is based out of Ukraine. Ukraine has been in the news lately.
Really? Yeah.
I know you don't really consume as much media as I do, but
Yeah, just a quick update. I can give you a quick update on that. It's kind of a surreal situation because I'm on calls, virtually every day with our teams working on design projects and continuing to work. They're not in a conflict area, so they are happy to be working, and so it's kind of a surreal situation because I talk to them all the time. I talk to them every day. We're working kind of as usual, and yet then I go home and watch the news for 5 minutes and I see bombs and everything else. So it's a little bit strange, but yeah, they're amazingly resilient. They're amazingly dedicated, and it's a good distraction for them to continue to work. And
I think I speak for the audience when my knowledge of the names of Ukrainian cities has tripled or quintupled. Which cities do your employees reside?
Two cities. One is Dnipro,
Okay.
on the Dnipro River, about halfway between Kyiv and the Black Sea. So they're right smack dab in the middle of the country, and the Russians haven't felt the need to invade that area. And then the other's in Lviv, so they're in, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is close to the Polish border, which has been quiet the entire time as well. So
not the entire time. I do remember.
Yeah, there've been some small
fired some missiles into Lviv.
Yeah, there've been some small attacks on strategic targets, also in Dnipro, but mainly industrial type targets outside the city and not in the city.
Well, it's inconceivable. Like, as a New Yorker, imagine just a small skirmish in Manhattan. I mean, it wasn't like the whole city. It was just the Empire State Building, and
yeah. Well, people are amazingly adaptable, and they're adapting, and they're getting food. They're even getting shipments and able to send shipments out through Poland. I mean, they're figuring it out as fast as they can, and they're learning to live with the situation the way it is right now.
We are getting a note about your microphone, so it's probably rubbing against your shirt. I don't know.
Okay, let's see. I can also switch to.
You know what? I think I know what it is. Is your computer fan on?
Yeah, let me turn this off and see if that helps, because
that was it.
Yeah, the problem with that is that
I'm going to overheat, and I'm going to have to do finger puppets later.
Right. And I got it at the lowest setting. Let me move it away, see if that helps.
I can still hear it.
Is it like obnoxious, or is it just
You're obnoxious?
Well, there's enough obnoxious in me. I don't know if you need any more obnoxiousness, but
let's go with the inevitable burnout, and somebody maybe raise your hand and take over for Jorg when he crashes. Rick, if you can stay on the line, you know a thing or two about design. You can maybe talk when.
And you know what else I'm going to do is I'm going to close other windows so that Zoom is the only application running, which will help as well.
As you do that, the name of today's talk, which was to be co-hosted by Andre Domino, who has been called away on business.
Our good friend Andre.
Good reason to blow off a webinar when he's making lots of money for his company. Is don't prototype until you what? And I'm thinking, I know very little about this, and to me, a prototype is a working model of the concept, and I can't prototype until I have something that might work that I can show an investor. So what else do I need to know that I should not do?
Well, I think maybe we should start by defining what prototyping is and a little bit better. Yeah, like, you're not using my mug, but thanks anyway.
I'll be right back, people. Excuse me.
I get a lot of calls. They call in and they say, "Oh, we need to prototype this thing," and what they really meant is we need to design it and build it, and that's a lot different than just prototyping. So,
in my defense, I've been in the United States for fewer than 24 hours. So, Ladies and gentlemen, as much as I do love the medical devices group, I find that my coffee always tastes better in a Tech Flex development mug. Get yours today. Where can they buy a Tech Flex development mug?
Not for sale. I can give them though.
You give them out to clients.
I give them out to special people. I consider MDG members a special.
Yes, Treya, I always record and they are always available at the same place, which is medgroup.biz/MD for medical devices, vid for video, MD vid.
All right, nice ad. That was a nice quick ad.
Yeah.
So, prototyping is not development. I just wanted to kind of make that distinction because I see a lot of confusion in it, especially people who are inexperienced in the field. They think that a prototype means I need you to build me this thing. And prototyping is really a part of a process of doing development. And I think it is used in a lot of different ways, not just in the finished product or providing. And so our vernacular is a little bit different maybe than others, but more or less everyone could agree that, we generally, when we start a product from scratch, we're doing, in the first phase, we're doing alpha prototyping and researching and trying to understand exactly what it is we're going to build. So there may be prototyping that goes on even at that phase. For example, prototyping a subsystem to prove that it can work, or it can meet a certain requirement, or it can be met, or it can be done at a cost, or any kind of thing. Anything that's difficult, we might be prototyping early on as a subsystem to make sure that it's viable in the finished product. We don't want to get to the finished product and then be troubleshooting backward. So that's also prototyping, and we do that a lot, and that's typically done at the alpha stage. We may build an alpha prototype. An alpha prototype would be a complete system, but it may not have the look and feel of a finished product. It's a functional product with all the subsystems that allows us to do further testing, etc. And then we generally go from that stage in alpha to beta, and the beta prototype is actually, in our vernacular, a full-blown, looks like, works like 100%, but may not be made from the production tooling, you might say. So you might have cast parts for shells instead of injection molded parts, but ultimately they function exactly the same way. You can use them for testing, electrical testing, for example, and things like that. So that's kind of how we define the various stages. There are, of course, many other ways that they're defined, but I think they may have different names, but more or less the same type of thing.
You don't need them, but do you happen to have slides today? You don't need them.
I do not, sorry.
Okay. Don't be sorry. You don't need them. You don't use them.
What I would suggest is, I could recommend that you go to Omnica website and look at their About section. There's a video there, quite a lengthy video, maybe 9 minutes, 10 minutes, but it takes you on a tour of Omnica's facility, which has.
Under what section? Under About?
About, yeah.
Under the overview team. Here, let me share the screen. From where?
About overview, I think. Yeah, there it is.
Here's Earl.
There's Earl.
Earl's the man.
So
And
Earl, other than wearing cool coordinated outfits,
sartorial splendor.
Is the president of Omnica.
Oh, we're taking a slow Earl.
It's a long video.
Oops. What do you mean there's no video on this side? Of course there is. There we go. Hey, I'm Earl. This is a great little tool, by the way, folks. It's called the HTML5, come on, Media Rate Controller.
Oh.
I have it in Chrome, and sometimes you just like, I know that you showed something at some point in that video, so then I go like 16 times. I know Jorg shows up at some point. I don't really care about this. And it's really convenient. So yeah. That is the HTML5 Media Rate Controller.
And so a little bit further on, you start seeing some of the equipment in terms of, so what Omnica has is unique, I think, in the industry in terms of having all these different capabilities under one roof. That includes machining, includes, and everything you're seeing here has been built in-house in the office. So, excuse me.
Well, folks, how many employees you have and what the average tenure of an employee here is?
Yeah. So Omnica has approximately 30 employees and has had that number for many years. The average tenure of an employee at Omnica is 18 years, which is
older than some of the members on this call.
What?
Older than some of the members on this call, I bet.
Perhaps, yes. It's just a great place because there's a lot of variety, and we do a lot of interesting stuff all the time. And I think people who love engineering, they get to do what they love here. So that's what they're.
And they have a lot of experience working together. So I imagine,
yes,
try to stump us on something that we've never done.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually, we don't like doing things we've done before. We like to do things that we've never done. So it's more interesting. So we like a challenge, but
it's the same pieces, right? I mean, the same concepts you're working together. We kind of did this.
It's physics is physics. There's not much you can't change physics. So a lot of the things are the same. Yes, there are, there's only so many ways to deliver energy into the body as an example, whether it's RF, cryo, ultrasound, etc. So those are all techniques that we've worked in many, many times. So these are all, so it's not to say that we've done everything. Of course, nobody does everything, but
if time allows, I wouldn't mind if you talked about RF, cryo, and the other things, because they're new to me.
Yeah. So the point being that we've really developed a place where we can have a drawing in the morning and have a party in the afternoon kind of thing, which is really there to save time. It's not that other people can't do any of those processes, but to be able to do them under one roof, solely dedicated to development, is a bit unusual, and it does save a lot of time.
I'm a little hung up in the very beginning of the call. The most basic thing you said is that people come to me and they're like, I need a prototype. Can you just, make me a sample of what it's going to look like and what it's going to do? And I'll be honest, I'm that much of a rube that I think a prototype is. I need to show someone what this thing can do, what it'll look like, how it'll function, human factors. I get that it's not going to be refined and polished, the right colors and all that stuff. But what's my big, oh yeah, that is such an immature way to think of a prototype, because
I think we should clarify too what we do in general. I think development fills a role where someone has a concept or a technology and wants to make it a production product. And so that's really what we do. Now, in that process, certainly there are periods of time where people need to raise money, they need to do show and tell, and there are many, many ways to do that other than having a fully functional device. Whether we do renderings from CAD that look photorealistic, whether we build models out of foam or cast models, or do whatever, paint them, make them look like finished products, to help in the fundraising and project, etc., portion of the business, excuse me. But
can I generalize that and say it's really just like I said, if you don't need slides, don't show me slides. A prototype can be anything to help you tell the story.
Right.
And it can just be, it could be a video, it could be an animation, it could be a photograph, it could be a drawing. All of these are considered prototypes, or is that just too liberal?
No, they're all prototypes. And in fact, you would call, for example, a user interface. They have prototype user interfaces. And so we have tools, for example, you can pull up the user interface on the web and click through it just like you would the product, but there's nothing functional behind it. So as an example, so that's a prototype. In fact, one of the tools we've used is called Proto.io, and it's a prototyping tool for user interfaces. Is that
yours? Is that an Omnica thing, or
no, that's an off-the-shelf, that's a cloud-based solution called Proto.io. If anyone's interested, you can go there on their website and see. what
Is it made by a well-known brand, or is it that's what?
no, that's the name of the company and the product.
Okay.
And so it's one of the tools we use. There are others, of course, and Adobe has a suite of tools, and you can always use Illustrator and other things like that, but those are prototypes. But so there's a lot of aspects of prototyping that it's not a generic term for some piece of hardware that you hold in your hand necessarily. You can have images of things. So I guess it all depends on what you need and the money that you
Looks
have.
like a very useful tool.
It is. It's quite useful, and you can do quite sophisticated things with it. And so our designers, we have 4 industrial designers, they would use this tool to mock up a user interface, looks like, in terms of clickability, and you can actually run through it and comment on it and make the changes in this format before you submit it to coding.
Okay. I know that you have a deep engineering background. You've spoken with us a couple times. I know that you focus primarily in business development. Do you play in these apps as well?
Not too much. No, I play sometimes in the review of them, and obviously I sit in on a lot of design reviews, including them. But no, I don't do the detailed work behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I tend to have a curiosity about everything, so which is a blessing and a curse. So I probably know more than an average business development person, probably much more because I've been doing this a long time.
It's your superannuation that comes into handy here.
Super what?
And it's a big word that means you're old. Just move on.
Okay, thank you. Superannuation. Okay, and now I get it. All right, thank you. Yeah, that too. So
and a lesson for all you burgeoning group leaders out there: insult your guests. I find that that's a way to really endear yourself to your audience.
It's all right. I get reminded of my superannuation every time I get up in the morning, so it's not a problem. But yeah, so it's prototyping has many forms, many uses, and ultimately there are different levels of prototyping and different methods for achieving those things. A lot of people think prototyping is 3D printing. 3D printing is only one small aspect. And again, if you watch that video, you'll see lots of 3D printers, and they are useful for various aspects. But the problem with 3D printing when it comes to manufacturability is that it's very easy to design something that is not manufacturable in 3D printing, because you can do things that tooling that can't be done in production. Mm-hmm. So a lot of prototypes, let's call them, or concepts that get delivered to us and say, make this a finished product, are just not even viable as a finished product and have to be completely redesigned.
I'm inviting a few friends on.
Great.
Because each of them has a thing or two to say about making stuff.
Great.
And I'm wondering how early they are called upon to get involved in these things. I want to start with Andrea, but I'm trying to remember. Is it Tula?
I'm telling you.
Come on, don't make Tula is even worse than what it really is. So why don't you just remember?
No, but I'm glad you put me on as a panelist, because I do want to raise the question of freedom to operate and the intellectual property, and when that comes in the process of prototyping.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we go out of our way to remind clients that we are not attorneys, and there are situations that come up where two things happen. One is we invent new things that, but because we're a work for hire type of business, that technology is, belongs to the client. But there are situations where they want us to design something, and it's basically an intellectual property minefield of previous patents and so forth. And we do our best to warn them about that. We certainly knowingly don't design anything that infringes, but you know how the legal system is. It's, you know, that's a whatever that means, right? People can sue you for anything at any time. So
I just cut myself in your mug.
oh, get out of here.
God,
It's dangerous.
see your.
That's what happens when you insult your guest.
Yeah, so it could be very frustrating for clients because before prototyping, they might feel that it's too early. It's too early because you don't know if the prototype is going to work, especially if it's the kind of prototype when it's more of a physical prototype, right? And you actually want to see if it works by doing the prototype. But once the prototype is done, then they're ready to go. And usually that's when they think about freedom to operate. And if there's even smart to do it at that point, and then the freedom to operate sort of due diligence uncovers infringement issues, then they have to go back to the drawing board and kind of design around. So it is
always I'm afraid to tip my hand as soon as you start researching. Some bot somewhere knows that somebody looked up that thing, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrea, and I think it, you know, fortunately for us, we push that responsibility back on the client, but because we have to, I don't see, you know, they're the owner of the product ultimately. But it is tricky, and I think, but a lot of technologies come out of universities. Usually there are patents, and I would say probably 70% of the time the companies already have patents, or at least applied for patents and done freedom to operate before we even get started. So there's probably been a significant amount of benchtop testing and technology development. You know, maybe they've licensed the technology from a university or something like that, which case I personally like that if I were a client, because you're much less likely to get sued if you have technology that's from a UC or an MIT or whomever.
Well, they still have to be very careful because, and especially universities don't do patent searching, not when they are applying for a patent application, and even less likely to do any freedom to operate. So just because you have a patent application and sometimes even a granted patent, that doesn't give you the right to manufacture or sell a product, right?
That's
it
true.
just blocks, it gives you the right to block other people, but you could still be infringing. So that's a very big misunderstanding.
You could be certainly, and again, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not as expert as Andrea on this, but I think most of those issues, you know, when people have come to us, they've already got investment, so they've already had investors go like, well, where's your freedom to operate before I even invest? You know, so there's been due diligence done in most cases. So again, it's not our responsibility, fortunately, but we do tell people that they need to get this, you know, if they're really green. But, you know, honestly, if they're really green, they probably don't have funding, and then they're not really going to be somebody that's going to develop into a customer for us. So it's kind of one of those things where, you know, most good customers are either well-funded startups, and well-funded startups usually have experience because they've brought in experienced teams, either at the demand of their investors or, you know, before they got investment. And so it kind of balances out, but everything you say is certainly true.
I'm gonna go a little out of expected order and call on Jan next, because poor Jan, she's usually the last person
We love
people think
Jan.
about. We're gonna make the thing, and oh shit, we need to put this in a box. Do we know
Yeah.
anyone who knows anything about
Often
boxes?
neglected, isn't it, Jan?
Oh, yeah, because shoot, especially if you're going to have a sterilized material or product,
Yeah.
looking at the nooks and crannies, looking at any kind of edges or anything on there, as well as the sizing. I mean, they just don't think about how are you going to sterilize, or how are you going to fit this into something? How are you going to ship this at a good price? How are you going to keep your materials sustainable, actually, because more and more places want you to have sustainable packaging to go with your product. And if prototyping just really helps to at least the 3D stuff, you start with drawings and everything first, but it's something you can look at and actually work with and figure out how to package so you can optimize your costs, help in production for, I don't even look at production for making the part, but production to actually try and put it in a package to ship it somewhere gets really involved at times. And
it does. And in fact, again, because we have a lot of experience at Omnica, for example, you know, we actually have our own thermoforming machine here. We actually make blister packs, and we can do that all in-house and have done so. And of course, all the experience of knowing, hey, you want to use this material, well, you can't irradiate this material because it's gonna break down. So we do have a lot of experience in that way, but we don't take it really, I think, to the level that someone like you, Jan, do, because most of the time we're being pushed to, hey, get this thing working, and
right, they
show
don't
me a
even
sample,
want to
and, yeah,
think about that
they
until
don't want to
they
think about it. Yeah.
until like I had one company where we could do one thing and it was, $10 to ship it, but the way they had it, I had to spend $125 a shipment, and that'll tend to break you up if you if
Yeah.
you don't think about those kinds of things and where it goes and how it has to
Yeah,
be
and
done.
that typically is more driven for the consumable part of medical devices, where you're making a lot higher volume and sterilization and so forth. When we're working on the electromechanical system, for example, we're often, it's not as big an issue. It's a box, it's electronics, and yes, you have to package it correctly.
Well, then
but-
you get into magnets,
Yeah.
some kind of attachments. I know we were having a lot of problems with soldering and lead contamination, and
Yep.
then you get into how are you going to return it, and batteries.
Yep.
Shipping batteries and
Yeah,
magnets gets to be.
Yeah, well, everything is a science of its own, really. That's what makes product development complicated, but also interesting, I think.
Yeah, more fun. That's
and-
why I've
and,
been in it so long.
There
Phrase
are a
another
lot of
term. Now, when I hear the expression about returning stuff, I think about Paul D'Souza, who regrettably had to jump off the call, but part of his work at Extron is returns management, refurbishing, and getting stuff back. So
Yep.
it would probably be a good conversation to have maybe you and Paul talk about returns management at some point.
Oh yeah, and some of the returns, I looked at something once and said, I'm going to go get hepatitis shots because they hadn't even cleaned the blood off of it and
Wow.
returned it in the mail, and we were trying to look at it to see what the issue was. And
That's pretty scary.
Let us turn our attention to Mr. Greg. Is it tours? Like I'm taking a tour?
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, Jorg.
Tell the kind folks at home what you do again.
So we make the PC power supplies for medical devices. So when you're prototyping, you don't need to worry about your power supply. You drop ours in, it works, does everything you need, doesn't worry about regulations, it meets regulations, you're good to go.
Do
Right.
we think of you then as, are you software as a service or do you ship?
Hardware.
Oh, okay, so maybe you'll show us maybe you'll call up the screen or show us, or what's your website? Put it in the chat and I'll call it up.
well, I've also had the thing where they've prototyped and forgot that they need to allow room for the power supply and the stuff
Yep.
going in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, there are people trying to do a lot of things that don't really have the experience, maybe have more money than experience. And, we tend to shy away from those kinds of clients anyway, because we don't want all those problems later on in life. So, generally, Jan, you've had some really bad experiences, sounds like. We're fortunate to be able to be selective about the clients we take on.
So when it comes, Greg, to the prototyping stage, I'm thinking that Jorg needs to order one unit of this to
Mhm.
have it function, and then Rick Stockton will come in and talk about design for manufacturability.
Yeah, so I mean, ours is already provided. We design to exactly what they need. So if they need to change how many cables or whatever when you design it, for example, we're talking to one customer right now, is they have a special preferable that's got to go in it, so we got to put a new cable in for them, provide power to it, but we can do that. So it's all about making it easy to make things assemble, so you don't have to have multiple power supplies. You just have one powering everything within your unit.
Is your main competitor someone else who makes these things, or people trying to start from scratch and building their own?
So our main competitors are people that sell regular commercial PC power supplies that aren't made for the medical market. So then you have to go and try to modify it, or you have to put ferrites on it, or do shielding or extra things to meet all the different requirements. Because you got to make sure, you usually have to make sure you meet the MOP and MOOP for your power when you're 6061.
Okay, I'm sorry, the MOP and MOOP.
Yeah, means of patient protection and means of, I always forget the other one, means of
Moving.
MOOP. Yeah, I can't remember what it is. It's MOPP and MOOP.
Anyone? Girish, do you know?
What the MOOP is. Means of operator.
It's 60601 basically.
Yeah.
It's
And
much
the
more
requirements
extreme
and,
that way.
you know, how much current can go through it and everything else.
Nick, when do people think about calling you relative to prototyping?
Yeah, T = 0.
Yeah, hopefully long before.
Yeah, I think everybody knew I'd give that answer, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as Joe has summarized health economics and market access before, you know, what's the point of doing any of this if no one will pay for it? And, you know, so,
I was just saying what you said.
oh, did I say that first? That was good. I'm glad I said that.
Just wanted to-
That, yeah, hey, I have an idea, you know, I should invent this device that does this thing. Now, of course, it depends on the product. I mean, if you have a new way of shipping coronavirus vaccine from point A to point B, you don't need Nick Anderson. If you are going to use
to be clear,
this,
we all need Nick Anderson.
no, thank you. I'll remind the audience that we started this discussion by saying how obnoxious we can be, and I think I take the cake on the obnoxious-o-meter.
What?
There's
Tell us
only
more,
so much
Morgan.
Nick
What?
Anderson.
What are you even talking about?
But no, there's certain things that you need health economics and reimbursement for in the medical world, and there's certain things you just don't. You know what Greg just described, you don't need my help. But if it's a new medical device that's designed to treat some illness or whatever, it's really worth knowing who's your target audience. Well, it's 65-year-old people. They're the ones with prostate cancer. And you go, okay, so it's Medicare. Where are you going to use it? I'm going to use it in the inpatient setting because my device for prostate cancer has to be implanted, and then the patient has to stay in the hospital for 3 days for observation, whatever. Okay, Medicare inpatient. So, and then what other comorbidities might these patients have? Do they have diabetes? And you go, without a doubt, 80% of them have diabetes. You go, okay, let me go look and do some research to make sure that Medicare even has a local coverage determination on this. If they don't, here's what you're going to need to do. Are you ready to do that? Because that's going to be 6 years worth of work. And, you know, your buddy who's a physician told you it'd be 6 months and you could be on the market. Sure, you can be on the market, you can have FDA approval, but you're going to be out of business by 7 months because ain't nobody going to pay for it. So yeah, my answer is always talk to me sooner than later. And I just painted a very bleak picture, of course, just for
No, but I think it's absolutely correct. And you know, like I said, most companies when they come to us had they already received investment, this economic analysis must have already been done. And most VCs are you know, at least the experienced investors are quite familiar with this. So
yeah,
I realize by
hopefully
calling
would have
all
been done.
all my friends here, all of our friends here, that I'm basically doing your presentation for you. Of what do you need to think about before you start prototyping? It's all of these things. And I have this conversation every couple of months. I just get wound up in this notion of, hey, I'd like to make a medical device. What should I do first? And it's like, well, everything. And that's just not an answer. And alumni may recall the conversation I've had a few times with Joseph Anderson, who I think of as my quality guy. And I'm like, well, if you don't have quality and you're going to hurt people, then that's first, which tugs at the heart of my marketing self, which is if there's no demand, then why even bother in the first place? So really, what is first?
I mean, I think what Nick said is true. You need to find the market if you want to ever have a hope of getting money, and most people can't afford to fund medical device developments on their own.
Statement before you start doing that. So marketing before Nick.
No, I think you need to know how it's going to get, who's going to buy it and what's going to pay for it. Do the surveys.
To whom is the first part of a positioning statement? I'm sorry, I win that argument.
If you go to any kind of incubator or you know, university startup, tech transfer, one of the things that they do first is they fund studies for the students or whatever the startup is, to go out and do interviews with patients and doctors and all the different people that might interact with such a product, and try to get some understanding of where it would be used, how it would be used, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's probably one of the first things, since it seems to be one of the first things that they do when they're incubating startup companies. You know, the thing is to find, I hear it all the time, you can't find you can't find a technology and apply it to a problem. You need to find the problem and
Mhm.
apply the technology, right?
Rick, you've been uncharacteristically silent. We appreciate that, my loquacious friend. You are my design for manufacturability go-to person. Where do you come into play in the prototyping stage? Is it kind of like, what's the point of having a prototype if you're not going to be able to mass produce it later? So we should talk.
Happens all the time, by the way.
Rick, can you hear us?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying Greg, and I was going,
That sounds like a Rick question. It is a Rick question.
it's funny. We're talking about where do you start? And I've got about 4 clients right now, and they all started from a little bit different place due to their knowledge of the industry
Mhm.
and due to their knowledge of their own technology and the complexity of the technology.
Mhm.
So it's almost like you're a private eye in one of those cheesy old, things, and you've
Noir
got your
films.
dark office. Yeah, and somebody walks in and
Da-da-da-da.
yeah, and you got this monologue going on, and you're just kind of going, okay, yeah, they look like they've lost their love, or they're looking for this missing thing, or and some project comes in and it's the bombshell, but it's a really sexy project. It really looks just technologically alluring, and everyone is different. Some of them have like 3 parts, and some of them are fully electromechanical, and they all come in with different levels of sophistication and problems. And so what I try and look for is, where are they now? What do they say they want? And what's missing in between? And we all end up having to do that because Jorg, if you're in your office, and somebody's popping in or somebody sends an email about a new project, that's the first thing you do, isn't it? You try and look at, who are they? Where are they? What are their needs? And how can I help them?
You totally should start a company, you folks.
Kind of
If we really do have every function you need among friends who like working together. I mean, I should be much, much wealthier than I am. This is something that's very wrong.
Well, Jorg has got everything going on as far as just development capabilities and prototype capabilities. And so I'm probably a lot more specialized. I would be one of your little departments. And if they come up with a mechanical thing and they're just trying to figure out, well, how are we going to make this? During the pandemic, I had somebody come to me with this project, and it was recommended by somebody else in the group. And it was a great young engineer up in the Northeast. And he designed this really great thing, and he 3D prototyped it. And it goes, Jorg, to something that you were saying before. And they were getting no quotes from all their plastic people.
Yeah,
right.
Classic.
So, and it was a multi-stack sort of system. It was about like this big,
Wow.
and it all had to snap together, and it all had to do this stuff. And of course, Microsoft support is called. Hold on 2 seconds.
Okay.
Talk among yourselves. I'll be right there.
Well,
Girish,
to
you are
Rick's
the
point, I mean, I think it depends on your device as well, right? Because like he said, some of the things are very, very simple, maybe 2-3 mechanical things that hang together somehow, interrelate. So maybe prototyping is cheaper and you can do that earlier on. Whereas for other things with very, very complex elements and power and whatnot, that might be more expensive, more time consuming. So it might make sense to do some of the other things before that.
Very true. That's very true. And that's why the more complicated, the more prototyping we do on a subsystem basis, because really, when you talk about manufacturability for complex devices, we often talk about testable subsystems. So even in manufacturing later in high volume, you want to have testable subsystems so that by the time you've put it all together, every subsystem has been tested and 100% that it's going to work. Otherwise, you're going to be in a troubleshooting nightmare. That
It's
could
very
take
much
forever.
parallel to intellectual property, because sometimes people come and they're like, oh, here, clear a product. And the product has 20 features, and that's basically 20 FTOs.
Right.
And it's very, very expensive, and it takes a very long time. Whereas if you break it down and you do them, sub feature by sub feature, then it's more manageable.
Yeah.
And
So
that goes with packaging too, because if you're getting sub features or subunits, sub assemblies from other places and putting them together later, you need to get them from one place to another without a problem. And you need to do your packaging tests in between to make sure if you have a problem with the final product, where did it happen along the line?
Yeah, packaging can also take a lot of time. Like even, I mean, we're working mainly in very low volumes, 2 to 20 systems, but just unpacking stuff,
Yeah.
components, it can take hours and hours depending on how they're packaged and how, so there's a lot that's something you wouldn't want in a more mass production process, because it's just time is money.
Yeah, and trying to get people to understand that the small units that they're doing their testing on, the small quantities, is going to be so much different than what you have to do in a large scale, confuses people too sometimes, and it's fun. I do have a client right now.
People don't have a good understanding of the whole process. I mean, when you go into real contract manufacturing, let's say for significant quantities, you're talking about test fixtures that you have to design and build, and all these. I mean, it's like there's a whole nother world of NPI, new product introduction, that goes on to ramp up production, which that most people don't even think about early on, which I guess they can't. It's too much stuff.
My hosting job here a little bit. Rick was going to finish his point. Girish is very polite and writes a very long chat message instead of just piping up and asking. So we'll get to that. And Maren, I have repeatedly invited you to the screen so you can ask your question. And I would also like to bring David Rutledge on. He's our newest member, and he can say hi and tell us what he does. So Rick.
Oh, yeah, I told Microsoft to call back in 30 minutes. And but if you're we're talking about the complexity of taking in some of these different projects. And if you want a really good cross-section of some of the different kinds of things you'll see, just subscribe to Jorg's newsletter, because he puts something out on a regular basis, which is sort of an industry summary of some new things that are going on. And it's really mind-blowing. And I saw that great question about changing the purpose of the prototype. And that's
you can't do that. That was a good question, but go ahead. You can answer that, Rick.
Is that Girish's question?
No, but I can answer Girish's. Which one would you like me to answer?
I don't know. There's just so much. I'm curious to know who asked the question that you thought was a good question, because I've lost track.
Oh, it was Maren.
That was Maren.
Changing. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we see a lot of. People go, oh, well, you have this prototype, so I'm going to put it into a clinical study, start using it on humans. And like, whoa, it's those people in the regulatory world would go screaming down the hallways. In order to use a device on humans, it needs to be produced under, ISO 13485 and design, have all the design control, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to either have an IDE or some sort of clinical permission to use it. So you can't just take a prototype and go off and use it for another purpose, as long, other than, you certainly can't use it on humans, just without following the proper guidelines. And even in California, you have to have registered. There's even a California registration, of course, because California is California. So there are a lot of things that have to be done. But I don't know if that answers your question, Maren.
Maren cannot be heard.
I can't hear you, Maren.
Let's try that, Maren. 1 second. Let's move to Girish. Very politely has waited.
Sure. Well, thanks.
Thank you, Girish.
No worries. So Jorg, I'm sure you've experienced this before, right? But one of the things that I've come across is you've got a client, they've raised a bunch of money, they have this hot new idea, and they say, well, this widget can be made for $200 and we're going to, I don't know, make it out of cardboard. And of course, once, to your point earlier, I completely agree, physics is physics and you have limitations, right? And so you get to this point where you soon discover that, well, it can't be done. And that makes for difficult conversations with your clients. And of course, that puts them in a difficult spot with their investors. So my curiosity is, have you, in your experience, done anything to get ahead of this, right? When you're qualifying clients that you're taking on, or maybe perhaps you have some other bits of experience there you may be willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. There are some universal truths in product development. Is if you ask a customer, how soon do you need it? The answer is as soon as possible. That there's never a different answer. and how much is what's the cost target? It's usually some unrealistic cost target. So yes, the answer there is, but I think we're just very cautious. We don't try to. I think the tendency of most people is to say, oh yeah, we're going to try to do that for you, and we're going to, and I think, we always want to please, but the reality is different. And so you have to be willing to have the conversations and say, look, this isn't going to happen, and we're telling you now. We would rather have someone say, wow, okay, I'm glad, a year from now, let's say, we'd rather have someone say, wow, I'm really glad they stood up and told us the truth, versus continuing to do work and continuing to cost them money when we have no real expectation of getting there. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. And so I think it causes, we try to guide them from our experience as much as possible. I mean, we don't know everything. So if they insist on proceeding and doing whatever, then of course, we'll continue to do it. But we're always pretty conscious of that when we're talking to customers from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. In fact, I think somebody mentioned university startups at some conversation. I think that's a common issue that, at least I've run into in the past with those companies where they're not as familiar with some of the regulations and the requirements, and certainly it makes for interesting conversations. So
you have to be able. I mean, this is a tough game. You're talking about people spending millions of dollars, or investors investing, or VC funds investing millions of dollars. It's not it's people's livelihoods, it's people's money, it's people's. So I think you have to be as soon as possible. These problems never get better. I think that's one thing I can tell you from experience. They never get better. They only get worse. And so you have to talk about them ASAP.
Yeah.
Thank you, Girish. You make a great addition. Just remind your boss to show up every once in a while and see if you can't have him come to 10X as well, since he's like an absentee landlord at this point.
I'll say exactly those words to him.
Okay, well, we have it on the recording, so we can extract it and just send it to him. Myron, have we worked out our technical difficulties?
So thanks, guys. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you, Girish.
Thank you.
I believe we did.
We have.
Can you hear me now?
I can, and I think of you and Nellie as quality gals. Have you ever met one another?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right, well, now you have.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. The comment on the prototypes was just that it's really important to identify up front what the prototype's going to be used for. I often find clients that want a quick and dirty prototype, so they won't even capture the spec. And if you don't have the spec for the prototype, you have no hope of being able to try to figure out how you're going to justify it for verification or clinical use or anything like that.
Exactly.
So that's one of those lack of understanding things where people believe that what they need to test is the device instead of they need to verify the specification.
Right.
Just to even kind of build off what you're talking about is I love prototypes because it gets everybody excited. The one thing that's the con of prototypes, and it's something I'm finding out with a lot of the clients I'm interviewing, they think they have such a great project that they can bully the FDA and that they don't need to make any quality system requirements. We don't need to control design control. I mean, I've literally had 3 interviews in the last 2 weeks, and they're like, well, we don't really need, all of your QMS. We just need, 2 things. And I'm all, you need design control? Oh, no. We're just going to do a DHF binder and give it to the contract manufacturer. And I'm just like, I don't think I want to work with you.
I would agree with that.
Pass over briefly, and I happen to have 3 interviews, and not a lot of folks on the call have got 3 prospects knocking on their door, and you're like, yeah, I really don't know if I.
Well, it's interesting. So feast or famine is really what it is.
Same thing with Rick Stockton right now. He's like, you can't keep up. But in the middle of COVID, it was like, brother, can you spare a dime?
But right now, it's like I think it's like everybody had their brains in crock pot mode for the last 2 years. And now all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I have an idea. It's brand new. It's genius. And it's like you're talking to them. And I don't care about the product, and not to be said, I care about the product in that the company has one. But from a quality system perspective, if you meet the regulations and you meet your due diligence on design control, I'll pretty much work with most anybody unless you're being unreasonable about quality systems. And then it's like, I've done too many of them where it's just not, I mean, if
Not
I have
worth
to,
it.
it's not worth the heartache, the heartburn, or nothing. But what I was going to say is I almost wish prototypes came with warnings. You need to meet design specs. You need to have the
Yeah.
QMS. You need to have controlled documents and drawings and parts release, because everybody thinks once they have a prototype, oh, I can be in manufacturing in 3 to 6 months. Where's your
Yeah,
documentation?
That's one of the things we always say is like, do you have a quality system? Do you have a consultant submitting your 510K? Do you have something? Because if you don't, it's all of our activity is not going to get documented, and then you're already behind the 8 ball.
Nelly, give us
if
a
you-
quick commercial for your webinar in 2 weeks. You'll be our guest host.
Hey, I got to drop off, unfortunately.
This is your call. You can't go
I
anywhere.
know, I'm sorry, but I have a
Right.
client who's
Yeah, okay.
who pays me.
So did you just ask me, Joe, to pitch what I'm talking about next week, in 2 weeks?
Yeah, go ahead, do that.
So I'm
Okay.
going to be doing root
Thank you,
cause
Joe.
All right.
analysis.
Thanks for the insults. I appreciate them.
See you later, George.
Yep, I
Bye.
gotta drop
Talk
off
to you later,
too.
Nelly.
Okay,
Thank
bye,
you.
Marty. Bye, Jorg. Nell?
So in a couple weeks, I'm going to be doing root cause analysis for simple people. I wanted to say dummies, but I thought that might be too.
But we
Hard.
simple people can relate. Go on.
Well, yes. And so one of the things I've learned is that if you go to any medical device company, who's the person who owns CAPA? It's always quality. And really, that's not what the FDA wants. And so I've come up with some methodologies. And what happens, and I started a mentoring program for CAPA people. And as a part of it, I've come up with these CAPA forms that are, when you first look at them, your brain shuts down. But then once you go through them, I've actually had people come back to me and they're like, oh my God, if I just followed the instruction of every field, I got it. And I didn't need to come visit with you. I could do it myself. So it's taking the concepts in the forms without telling them they're using them and building them right into a form that's really simple for users.
2 weeks from today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Nelly.
Yeah, that's good.
David,
Hey,
hello, welcome, newest member. Tell us
yeah,
about it.
hey, first time being on screen in the panel here, and thank you, Joe, for working through and getting me approved as a member and looking. I've already registered
It
for
was
10.
very difficult. My virtual assistant Ann took care of everything. Please
Yeah,
continue.
she's great.
I
And,
love her.
Yeah, and I'll be down in San Diego with you guys. Got everything fixed up over there, and just wanted to say, just a joy to be a part of the group, and it's a wonderful legacy program that you've put together, and you're changing the lives of people all over the world.
Enough about me. What do you do, David?
Okay. So I'm a 3-year-old global consultant and mainly clinical, regulatory, and quality, and I've got a lot of vast experience. And really, for me, I'm looking at different opportunities all over the world, but right now the focus is in Europe because of that revolution that's occurring over there with the
MDR.
regulations, yeah, and IVDR. So that's where my focus is a lot, but I can do lots of different stuff. And I built this business, Global Strategic Solutions. We're here in Silicon Valley here in California, kind of as a B2B model where I've got contracts set out, I don't know, 15 contracts with businesses that I partner with to get things done and kind of coordinate things, or have some team of people on my company to
Okay.
help coordinate some things. So
We'll have you as
it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
We'll have you as a future guest, and you can
Yeah.
tell us more. And we'll have a chance to meet. It's it's fewer than 2 months now. We'll have a chance to have some ice cream together.
Yeah,
So
that's right. Yeah.
that's a nice sweater. Where'd you get that?
Probably Amazon. Yeah. So, yeah. It was
2 for 1 stock split. Okay.
right. Glad you're back from Helsinki.
I am too.
The trip was good.
It was a great trip.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the
David,
time to say hello to everybody.
I'm too glad to do it. I'm glad to have you join us. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Ladies and gents, we have Rob Packard next week, and the subject of his talk is how to create an IVDR quality plan. Okay, that's just what David was just talking about. So, and Nelly too. So it all comes together. Glad to be back, and I really enjoy these calls. Thank you all so much for being part of my family. I'll see you in person in San Diego soon. Until then, be well. Bye.